I was seeing a lot of, I guess, directions people are going with this and specific names and specific instances of what happened that directly and personally influenced their life, which I think can still check here with this particular instance. Because, you have your normal heroes, and I'm not gonna name my parents because the things they went through just to make sure I have gotten where I've gotten, or given me enough an opportunity to do what I can do. I think those go without saying. I mean, I used to think my mother could change the day of the week, So the thing is I feel like there's such a foundation, and maybe it's because of the industry we're in, and maybe because of the subject matter of politics, which this shouldn't even be a political issue. But I was thinking, this popped up last week when we were on Twitch and we were doing the Common Room. Actually, Ash was there, and we were talking about movies and what movie may have influenced you, or stuck to you, or speaks as to who you are. And I said Gladiator, right? And we've been fans of Gladiator since it came out. It's been a staple of the Young Turks. So, absolutely, we quoted that movie, and every time even part of it comes on, I sit there, everything else stops, and I watch that movie and I quote it, and my wife thinks I'm crazy. So, things like, but the reason behind that was because I was like, man, these people had a life. They had this one life. Some of them were slaves that were sent to fight a fake battle and surely died. Some people were other kind of slaves that had to work their whole lives, and who knows how short or long those lives were and how miserable they could have been. I'm lucky enough to be living right now, to be alive, to have a great job, to be surrounded by friends, to have a roof over my head, to have food to eat, even during this pandemic. And I was like, what is it about me getting this life that other folks in the past maybe didn't get, or what they had to do with it to give me this opportunity? So I guess it's a roundabout thing of all the unnamed, not spoken of people from civil rights era, because we're living through it constantly now. And then we talk about the history of the civil rights era, and that's America's opportunity to say we've come so far, and why don't you stop complaining? When in reality, it's a blueprint for how we need to continue to do things the right way. So, we have movies, we have Selma. So we're talking about the march from Selma to Montgomery in 1965, right? So things like that mentions the late John Lewis, mentions Martin Luther King, mentions all the names and the heroes of the civil rights era. But I'm always like, man, what about those other 600 people that marched with him? What about the 25,000 people that finally showed up several days later when they tried it for the third time? What are their names? Those are my heroes, because they're the ones who, if Martin Luther King walks by himself, if John Lewis walks out there, just with Hosea out there, then we got three guys walking. And they have more of a reason to just say, look at these three crazy guys. But it's that massive sea of people behind them that marched with them, that also got beaten, that also got sprayed with fire hoses, that also got killed by our system, because they were who they were and they were fighting for something else. We don't know these folks' names in this picture right now. Can you name all 30 of those folks? Can you name this man who's leaned up against this church sign being harassed? Now, some people do, because that's your family, but that's not what's being taught. And I understand it's hard to do that. So I'm just gonna read one part of this, one piece of the Bloody Sunday thing that happened to John Lewis back in '65. So it said, when 17 people were hospitalized, dozens more injured. There's 17 unnamed people. There's dozens more that are more unnamed. Then they come back, and further on they continue this push to make something happen, and it swelled up 25,000 people. Those 25,000 people were not going to make it if the first 600 didn't decide to go and back up the leaders of this particular thing. The I Am a Man march that happened in '68, which eventually led up to Martin Luther King's death. That I Am a Man march spoke to me so much, the way that we're doing the Black Lives Matter marches now. Because I'm sure many people of that era would have been like, what do you mean you're a man? Of course, I'm a man too. Why are you talking? Is there so many similarities for the fights that we're having right now? It's such a simple sign, I'm a man. It's because you didn't consider me a man, you treat me like less of a human being. I need to remind you sometimes, I'm gonna walk right in your face and I'm gonna tell you who I am. It's a similar energy that we have to do now. And if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here trying to do it another way to progress things further. So the numbers of people that came out from the sanitation strike in Memphis that long ago, because two men that were working that were underpaid, they were treated like garbage, died in an on-work accident because it was a dangerous job. Sanitation workers, which of course, damn near all were black men at the time. And the system was trying to just stomp on their neck and shove them aside constantly. How much energy do we have to come back day after day after day after day and do this? These things didn't last for one day and then it's over. We have these pictures in our heads of these folks that went and fought and then sat there peacefully many times and took these kinds of aggressions towards them. And their names are not out there. They're the real heroes of the country that pushed these things further. They're the ones that were inspired and then put their lives and their bodies on the line to push things forward. Those are the people that, and it's impossible, I get it, it's impossible to thank every one of them. But as a collective group, they're setting the stage, because I put myself in that same mindset. What if I was born in 1940 and I'm 25 years old and 65? What would I have been doing? Would I have been sitting back? Where's the energy and the courage to do something like that? To be like, we're not gonna walk on, Ida was just talking about this. What's the point, as her grandmother said, what's the point of walking around just fine and dandy, but then feeling like you didn't do anything to progress your life or take your stance for the human that you are? And these are the tons of people that did that. And they did it for themselves and their future generations. The way people talk about, you do something for your children and your grandchildren. This is what they did for us. We are their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren. And we owe it to them to remember them, if not even by their name, but by their actions.
Yeah, Jayar, I love that. And you could even argue that they're more heroic, because at least Martin Luther King and John Lewis, et cetera, got the credit. They get credit that they richly, richly deserved. But those folks that you mentioned took the same risk with their lives. And oftentimes, look, sometimes leaders would be protected. Not in the civil rights movement, John Lewis got his skull cracked. But a lot of those folks are on the front lines and they never got a lick of credit for it. And nobody ever knew their names. Nobody ever gave them a pat on the back, but they did it because it was right. And then, by the way, there's also the people in the middle too, like Bayard Rustin is a great civil rights hero that not a lot of people know about. He was obviously black, but he was also gay, and enormous courage. And so we have too much, like, this is the most ironic example, because Martin Luther King is my hero. And so I should be doing the same thing that you're talking about, and in a sense I am through this segment. But like we think sometimes there's a false impression that MLK did everything. No, he organized, he led, and he gave the speeches. But Rustin behind the scenes set up a lot of those events, and people didn't get to see that, right? So many people that work so hard to do all the things that are necessary to get to that moment where MLK gives that speech that changes our lives. And so give them credit too. So, and it's true in every movement. No matter, the civil rights movement just happened to be so historic, so life-changing. But for us at a smaller level, we did Democracy Spring, and Kai Newkirk organized it. He deserves a ton of credit. Guys like Ryan Clayton did a lot of work behind the scenes to make it happen, and so many others now that I can name. But over 1,000 people got arrested. So if anybody heard about it, it might be because Rosario Dawson got arrested or Kai did a great job, et cetera, right? But all those folks, they're willing to take some risk to come out there. Now in the civil rights era, it wasn't just some risk, it was tremendous risk. So we talked about it with John Lewis, the Freedom Riders, and how they'd stop in the middle of the night and the Klan would be waiting for them in the South. But with the Freedom Riders, there's tons of them who you've never heard of. And some of them were black, some of them were white, some of them were Christian, some of them were Jewish. And you might have heard a couple of their names, but they all had more courage than we would know what to do with.
Yeah, it's inspiring. So I don't know the best way, I guess, to push that forward, But there needs to be some level of recognition for things that they did. And honestly, the people that died. I mean, we've made a point. And this, I hate to come at it this way, but you start thinking more about life and death the older you get, for obvious reasons, but also because, as we've all experienced, we lose people. We constantly losing people this whole year, and we look up and we're trying to figure out, why does this keep happening? And then, so when's next for us? So you think, what is it you've done to better the world. If you're that type of person, it's not like you have to be, but my mindset goes to that sometimes. And we've talked about when we talk about racism and the things that people used to do to black people's bodies and still do, by the way, just not on not with the exhibition that they used to do it with. We talked about lynchings. They were still trying to push these anti-lynching laws. And if you have to fight with someone who's against this, you have to show them pictures of people that were lynched. It's the same thing we're doing now. And we said, prove that police are violently attacking black folks at a disproportionate level. We got to show you a video of somebody dying before you get upset. So in this case, we have to show old pictures, black and white pictures, where you've mentioned this before, Cenk. Picnics happen around bodies of dead black people because they just hate them. They get kids out there. They take parts home like trophies. This is what happened in this country. These are the type of things that aren't taught. But we have to show that, and we even forget that person that we're showing to prove this point was a human being who had a mother and a father and probably kids and sisters and brothers. But we're have their end of their existence on display, so we can prove something to someone in 2020 that something else needs to be done, and this needs to be seen as serious as it is. That was a human being. That was a real person, and it gets used like that. Thinking that we're trying to progress the argument, but then we start to use them. Those folks, we've seen all those pictures. What is their name? What were they doing? Walking down the street, caught at the wrong time? And that's the end of it. It's frustrating. And you wonder in some way to thank them for it. Even though they didn't do anything but want to go to work, go back home and love their kids.